Hello class, we're going to pick up now where we left off last week on chapter 20, the permanent wave chapter. So we left off on end papers, okay? End papers are also known as end wraps. They are not rolling papers. Keep that in mind. Rolling papers is a whole other thing, all right? So end papers are also known as end wraps. You may see that on your state board exam, so you'll know that they're both the same thing. They are used to keep the ends of the hair straight as the hair is wrapped around the rod. So you need to make sure that when you're placing your end wraps that you're keeping them nice and straight. Okay, you don't need them bunched up. If the end papers are not used correctly, the result will be fish hooks. And everybody knows what fish hooks are. You have rolled perms already. They're when the ends of the hair is bunched all up and very fuzzy when it is dry. So if you do have this, it will have to be cut off. And for somebody that does not want their hair cut after a perm, you need to make 100% sure you do not have fish hooks, okay? The three main types of end paper placement are single flat wrap, where you use one end paper on top of the hair. That one can be a little bit harder to use, especially if someone has coarse hair or has a little bit of natural curl or old perm in the ends. Sometimes it is hard to get the hair straight on one end paper. Then you have the double flat wrap, which is their best because that keeps you from bunching up the end paper, okay? Bunching up the hair. So a double flat wrap is one paper on top of the other. You've already done that. And then your book end is where you take one end paper and fold it over, just like a book, okay? That one is good, and a lot of people use that one, but a lot of people, unless they're very experienced, have a tendency to bunch the hair up in the end paper when they do the book end wrap. That is why we prefer that you, while you're in school, to use the double flat wrap. But the book end wrap does work really well if you have a very small piece of hair or section of hair that you don't need two end papers. If you have like a little section on the side at the sideburn or at the nape of the neck, a book end wrap works really good there, okay? A cushion wrap is also used, and a cushion wrap is simply where if somebody has a lot of layers in their hair, you may have to keep laying end wraps up and down the hair strand as you're rolling to keep hair from jumping out of your rod, okay? That is not used very often, but if someone does have a lot of layering or the hair is very uneven, sometimes you have to use what is a cushion wrap. If you ever have to use those on the clinic floor, we will show you how to use that. It does help a great deal, okay? Always make sure that the hair is not bunched up in the end paper and that all the ends are covered. If you are rolling or you get ready to start rolling and you tear your end paper, just go ahead and throw it away. Do not try to roll in an end paper that's torn up because it's just aggravating. Okay? And you'll probably not get a nice roll up. But the end paper is very important, and that you lay them correctly and that all the ends are completely covered in the end paper. If they fall out, get another end paper and start over. Okay? All right, so some of the things to remember, okay? Always section the hair before rolling begins. The sections need to be no longer than the length of the rod to get an even uniform curl. So sectioning, no matter what pattern you're going to roll in, and we're going to go over the pattern shortly, needs to be sectioned off because that gives you control, and it also helps you make sure that you do not have more hair on one rod than you do the other, that the ends of the hair on each end of the rod is not falling off. So sectioning just gives you all the control you need, just like for a haircut. Sectioning is very important before you start rolling a perm. There are three base placements that are usually used for perms. They're on base, half base, and off base. So you learn to beginners what those are. It's the same thing when you're doing roller sets. It's the same thing when you're doing Marcel curls. And each one of the bases are used for different reasons. On base will give you the most height, okay? It will give you a lot of height when you're doing a perm. So somebody that needs height or volume, on base is good. But the problem with on base is, especially somebody's hair that's fragile or fine, it puts a lot of tension on the hair that's underneath the rod. So you do not need, most cases you would not use on base, okay? Half base is usually the best, okay? Half base, it doesn't put as much tension, but it will still give you some height. So a lot of the times when you're rolling perms here at school, you will use a half base roll up. And off base is if someone doesn't care about getting volume at the scalp. They still want the curl, but they want more movement. They want the curls to move more freely instead of sitting in one place. Off base is good for that, but you do need to understand off base are not going to get any kind of volume at the scalp. So if someone wants volume, you would never use off base to roll a perm with. Base direction is the angle that the rod is positioned on the head. They are horizontally, vertically, and diagonally. All three may be used on the same client. So depending on the shape of the head, depending on the type of rod you're using, you could use all three of these throughout the head. A lot of times horizontally is used the most. So when you're doing your basic perm, most of the time it is horizontally that you're going to roll it up. Vertically is good for someone that wants their hair to go back. They like their hair to go back. Excuse me. Okay. And then diagonally can be sometimes for like if you can't get a rod, like the rod's in correctly, or you can't, there's like one or two places that you cannot get a rod in right. Sometimes diagonally is used. There's also, when we get into this shortly, different types of roll-ups that you can do them all diagonally. So it does make a difference how you roll them up. Okay. Kinks may be used to make the rods more secure and to keep the bands from cutting the hair. When you were beginners, we showed you what the picks did. We showed you how to put them in the hair. And they are really good for holding the hair secure. So they do keep the bands. Sometimes if somebody has fragile hair or fine hair or color-treated hair, even the bands being on them not that tight can pop the hair. So the little picks will help keep the rubber bands from resting on top of the hair, but you do have to be careful with the picks, because if you've got the rod in tight, the bands will make them even more tight and pull the person's hair. So after you get the picks in the hair, make sure that you ask your client, are any of the rods pulling? If they're pulling, you need to go in wherever they point to. If they say it's the nape or on the side, go and loosen the band, and if you've got a pick in there, loosen the pick, okay? Because once that solution gets on there, it softens the hair and it's tight. It can, when you remove the rod, even if the hair doesn't break that day, it can break later, okay? So picks are really good for holding the hair secure, especially short hair where the rod doesn't want to stay in, but it can also damage the hair if you have the hair too tight, okay? All right, wrapping patterns. It's all different types of wrapping patterns. Your basic 9-section wrapping pattern is the one you'll usually use the most. And when you were beginners, you practice that over and over. You're still practicing that, where there's 9 sections, 3 in the front, 3 across the top, and 3 across the nape, okay? That is your basic perm wrap, okay? Or some people call it a basic 9-section wrap. All your wraps are shown on page, let me make sure you get the right page, are on page, they start on 614, okay? You can see a picture of each one of these in your book. Like I said, the basic perm wrap is the one you will use the most, okay? You would not use it for like things like spiral perms and things, but a lot of times your body waves or the ladies that come in to get the perms, and then they're going to want you to roll or set it afterwards. This would generally be the one you would use. So while you're on the floor, this is what you'll see most of the time before you start rolling a perm. You will use the basic perm wrap, okay? Then you have the brick lay pattern. You don't really use that one that much, but it works really good if you do not want the lines that basic perm wraps put in. Whereas your basic perm wrap has like a line all the way from the front to the back, and when you, especially if the hair is very short or very thin, you will see that line. It will be a permanent line put through there for a few weeks until the hair starts growing out. A brick lay wrap stops that, okay? Because none of your perm rods are lined up. Now with the brick lay, it is very hard to section it for any kind of brick lay. So you basically comb the hair back, and you would see that in the book. you would comb the hair back, and then you would start in the front, rolling that one forward, and then you would go to the center of that rod, put another one to the left of it, another one to the right, and you just keep going. And when you get through with the perm, it's very hard to pick where the lines are. So someone that doesn't want to see that line pattern through there, you would use a brick lay for that. You do need to practice this, because since you are not using any kind of wrapping pattern as far as like the 9 section, it is a little bit harder to do to get it even. So that would be something you would need to practice. It does work really well in short to medium length hair. Okay. The curvature perm follows the curve of the head. It can be used for people that wants their hair to all go to one side or the other, and they can also be used for people that has certain curl patterns or things like cowlicks in the front or whatever, and it always tries to go one way and they want it to go the other. A curvature perm can help until the perm grows out, change the direction the hair grows, okay? It gives the appearance that the hair, they don't have a cowlick or don't have a swirl on their crown or whatever. So curvature perms work really good in that. They also work really good for someone if their hair, you can't really put a basic 9 section in because their head is larger. So if you do a curvature perm, it doesn't matter how large their head is, you can still get all the rods in there evenly. This one definitely takes quite a bit of time to master that one. When you look in the book, you can see why, because it's like very perfect looking, your curves, the curve pattern. That would be something you would want to practice over on the clinic floor. I can show you on the clinic floor how to do these, but that would definitely be one you would need to practice, okay? Then you have the weave wrap, and it sounds like just what it is. It's just like when you're doing foils, you're going to do the weaving in and out pattern where you do the same thing before you put a perm rod in there, okay? It also, even more than the brick lay, helps to break up any of the lines in there. When you do the weave pattern, you really cannot see the lines, okay? So if someone really does not want to see the lines, it also helps the hair to blend better. Helps, especially if you're using different size rods. If you're using like a white and a purple or something like that, alternate. If you use a weave pattern, it actually gives a really nice natural looking curl, okay? So a weave pattern works really well. Again, that is something you need to practice because it's not something you're used to doing, but they do give a really nice curl, okay? Then of course the piggyback, and y'all have done the piggyback, we did that at beginners, okay? It's also called a double rod wrap. So on your exams and when you go to state board, they may ask a question. When they may call it either one, you'll know what it is. They're the same thing, okay? And it's just what it says it is. A double rod wrap is when you're going to use 2 rods, okay? You've already practiced this, so you know you will use generally a smaller rod at the scalp, and then the last half section of that section of hair you pulled out, you would use a lot of times a larger rod, okay? And what it does is, since piggyback perms are done in long hair is generally heavy, and if you use the same type, if you use like a basic perm wrap, or you use the same size rod at the scalp as you did on the ends, the length and heaviness of the hair in a few days will start pulling the curl out. The curl appears not to be there. Even if the perm took, it appears not to be there. So sometimes if you use a smaller rod at the scalp, then the tighter the curl, the harder it is for the heaviness and the length to pull it out, okay? So that's why you generally use a smaller rod at the scalp. So some people, if they want like a lot of curls and their hair's long, of course the cut makes a big difference because layers help a great deal with long, heavy hair. But if they don't want the layers, then you might want to use, if they wanted a lot of curls, you want to use gray at the scalp and white on the ends, okay? Some people want even tighter, so you use pink rods at the scalp and gray on the ends, okay? So the piggyback or double rod wrap is really good for long hair. It is meant for long hair, but that is something, again, you need to practice. It takes quite a while to do it because you're using twice the amount of rods. But if you do it right, process it like it's supposed to be, roll it like it's supposed to be, people with long hair can have a really nice curly hair, okay? But you do need to practice that. And then the last one is your spiral wrap, okay? The spiral can be done with spiral rods, and I showed you the other day what the true spiral rods look like. And so when we go back to the clinic area, I can show you how those are used, and you can use them to roll up on each other, or you can use them to roll up on mannequins. You can also use the spiral rods for doing roller sets if you want to do that, just to see what it looks like. But if you're going to use, and a lot of times you are going to use the regular rod, the regular concave rod, to do a spiral wrap. And basically all it is rolled. You start at the bottom of the rod, going in a vertical pattern, and you start at the bottom and roll up as you go along till you get to the other end of the rod when it gets to the scalp. And if you use thin enough section, it's very important you do not use thick hair, a lot of thick sections for this. The thinner the section you put on that rod, the more curl you're going to get. It's going to take so much better. Generally, as a rule, you would use a basic 1 square inch of hair per rod, and you start at the nape and move up, okay? That is your pattern. Basically, you can split it into 4s or 2s down the center, but you start at the nape and you move up, and you just keep moving up and moving up until the head is complete. One other thing with a spiral wrap is you have to make sure of, when you go to process it, that you've gotten the solution on every rod. Since there's so many rods, and there is going to be a lot of rods in the spiral perm, you have to be careful you don't miss a rod with a solution, because it's really bad whenever you go to take the rods out and you got all these nice curls, and then one rod is just as straight as it can be because you forgot the solution. The same thing when you do the neutralizer. You have to make 100% sure that you covered every rod with a spiral rod, and it's harder with piggybacks and spirals. It's harder to make sure you got the solution on all of them. It's harder than it is the other kind, because there is so many rods and they're overlapping each other. So when you do the spiral wrap, just be very careful that you get the solution and the neutralizer on them all. But that is your basic 6 types of wrapping patterns, okay? All right, so some safety precautions for permanent waves, okay? Number 1, always double drape your client. You know why. You have to double drape them, 1, because you got to protect their clothing, okay? 2, you have to protect their neck. And also with the double draping, the towel that's on the top, there's a towel that's underneath the cape, towel that's on top of the cape. The towel that's on top of the cape, if it gets wet, it's very easy to remove it. Okay. Now, if you saturate them and soak them down, you're going to have to take everything off. You're going to have to take both towels and the cape, replace it. But a lot of times, if you're careful how you put the solution on, it will drip. They're sort of hard to avoid it dripping a little bit, but it will drip on the top towel. And then you just change the top towel. But you do have to double drape. It is very important that you double drape a client for any chemical, whether it's permanent waves, relaxers, colors, lighteners. You need to double drape for every client so you can easily take the top towel off and replace it, okay? Never give a perm to a client who has had allergic reaction to perms in the past. So what you have to do when you're doing your consultation is you ask your client, have you ever had a perm before? If they've not been here. When you take their client card and it's a new card, then you know they've not had one here before, or the card may have been misplaced, okay? So if they've never had a perm before, then you can do one of 2 things. You can go ahead and just give them the perm, and you just have to keep asking them throughout the perm, is it burning? Is there any problem? But you can also give them a strand test, okay? You can roll, if they say they've never had a perm, but when you ask them about allergies or something on your client card, they say, well, they're allergic to a lot of things, then that might be one that you would want to give a strand test to. So you just roll it up, put the perm solution on, process that one section of hair to see what it's going to do. And if they're going to have a problem with it, generally within a few minutes they'll start itching, or they'll say it's burning or something like that. If it starts doing that, there's a good chance they're going to have an allergic reaction. And if you think about it, you've rolled the whole head up, you put the solution on, and then they start burning or itching or whatever, you have to take it off, hurry up and get it off before the perm takes. You wasted all that time, and then they may end up with a lot worse reaction than you thought they were going to. They may end up in the emergency room. So if they've told you in the past, oh, I've had a lot of perms, I've never had allergic reaction, then there's a really good chance they're probably not going to have a problem again. But if they've never had a perm, or they're allergic to a lot of other things, you might want to give them a strand test, okay? Examine the scalp for abrasions before the perm service. Even though a lot of your perms, especially your very mild perms, the one that's like acid balanced perms, they're very mild on the pH scale. They may, if someone has a cut, a scrape, they've raised up under something and bumped their head, whatever, they might not even know they've got this on their head, okay? But once you put that perm solution on, they're gonna know it, it's there, because it's gonna be on fire, all right? So you need to, when you're going through the hair and you're parting it all, you're shampooing it, you're parting it off, and you're taking your subsections, pay close attention to the scalp, because there could be a little scratch on there, little tiny cut, there might have been a little bump that they scraped the top of it off. If that is there, if it's tiny, 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 and you can tell it's not bleeding or anything, you might be able to put a little bit of base on it and go ahead and give them the perm. But if it's a definite cut or a definite scrape, and you can see the skin is open still, they need to not get the perm. They need to wait until it's healed up and come back, because like I said, this stuff, even though it's not that strong, when you compare it to things like lightener, it will still set them on fire when that perm solution hits it. Okay. Do not perm hair that is extremely damaged. People will come in and their hair will be in horrible shape and they still want a perm. Well, I don't care, I still need this perm. My hair is so flat, I want a perm. Please give me a perm. And this is your chance as the professional that knows what they're doing to say, no, I'm sorry, since we're not cutting the damage out of your hair, this is just going to make it worse. So I'm sorry, I cannot give you a perm today, okay? If they've got damaged hair on the ends and they're going to get it cut off, then yes, you can give them a perm. But if their hair is just damaged from so much color, because you know how everybody likes to color their hair over and over and over and change the colors, or they may have an old perm, or they do their own chemicals at home, whatever. If in your judgment, if you think they don't need to get a perm, listen to your inner self. Okay, if there's any doubt that they should get a perm, do not give them a perm. Of course, here at school, you're going to do your consultations with your teacher. Okay, so when your instructor goes over and looks at it too, then we may say they don't need a perm. Okay. But you can look at it before we even get there, and come over, and we're going to ask you, what do you think? And yes, that's your chance to tell us, I don't think she needs a perm. Her hair is really, really dry. Really dry. It feels dry. It looks dry. It's breaking off in my fingers, whatever. Then we're not going to give her a perm. We'll tell her she's got to come back later, or if it's just on the ends, you do have to cut all this off before we give you a perm, okay? But if the hair is extremely damaged, we do not, under any circumstances, give them a perm, okay? Never give a perm to hair that has a hydroxide relaxer in it. Now, we have not covered relaxers. We're going to do that next, just the next part of the chapter. And once we cover that, you'll understand why. But a permanent wave and a hydroxide relaxer, we've touched on it already a little bit previously. Those two do not go together. They cannot go together. The chemical composition of each one of those is so different, and what it does to the hair is so different that by putting one on the other, or vice versa, can very easily destroy the hair. When it goes inside the hair, it will actually destroy the hair. So whenever we have a client that comes up to our window, for instance, over on the clinic floor, and we suspect, and a lot of times the teachers will suspect it before you do, that there's one or the other in the hair, then we will not give them a chemical. We will not give them a permanent wave if there's any hydroxide relaxer. And if they're not sure what's in there, they can say, well, I got a straightener. Well, there's different kinds of straighteners, which you'll learn when we cover relaxers. There is a few straighteners, few relaxers that is compatible with a permanent wave. But we have to be sure what kind it is. If we're not sure, we will strand test them. Because if it's fine, when we give them the strand test, there will be a problem. If there was a hydroxide relaxer in there, then there's a really good chance the hair will start popping off really quickly. And if you just think about it, if we put that all over her hair, what would have happened when we took the rods out? Okay, so those two never, ever, ever they cannot be interchangeable. If somebody has hydroxide relaxer, we have to wait till it's completely cut out before they get a permanent wave, and vice versa. There can't be any of that left in the hair. Okay. If metallic color is suspected in the hair, test for metallic salts or do a strand test. Okay. So most times we do the strand test because a lot of times if people put color in at home, it may have been a while, it may have been a year ago in long hair. They don't remember what it was. They can't remember the name of the color, the brand. They can't remember what the box looked like. They don't remember where they bought it at. Okay. And it could very easily have been metallic. So, and I told y'all earlier, you remember about the girl that when I was in school, got her hair melted because she had metallics. Well, you don't want that to happen. So if you suspect there's metallics in there, if we suspect it, then we will give them a strand test, okay? We may be wrong. It may not have been anything like that. But if they can't remember anything about it and the hair is extremely glassy, or all they got to do is tell us it's something I sprayed in to lighten it, then there's a really good chance it was something metallic in there. So then we will do a strand test somewhere, so if it breaks, it won't really show, maybe underneath the back. But we're going to have to test it, and we have to tell them we're going to test it to make sure you don't have metallic color in there, because you do not want that kind of disaster. Okay. Use a base cream around the client's hairline for added protection. Now you're going to put cotton around the hairline. Okay. You're going to give your client a towel to hold, just in case it's going to run, and there's a good chance it can run, especially if they look down while you're applying it or whatever. But the protection from the cream actually does two things. One, it's the barrier between their skin and that solution. Okay, so if you use your regular base cream, it is a very good barrier, and the Perm solution is not going to go through it. But you do have to be careful that you don't get the base in the hair, because just like it's a barrier for your skin, it's a barrier for the hair. So if you get a lot of the base in the hair, the Perm is not going to take wherever that base is. But also the base is a really good thing, which is an off thing for holding the cotton in place. Because some people, if they move around a lot, some people cannot be still, they move around a lot, the cotton's going to keep falling. If the cotton falls, the solution is going to pour in their eyes, okay? So if you put that base cream on and then put the cotton up against the base cream, then you've got two lines of protection. You're protecting their eyes, of course, with the cotton, but you're protecting their skin from the solution. So always make sure you put the base cream, just don't get it in the hair, and then you put your cotton on. And get their neck really good with the base, because, of course, the solution is going to be going down their neck. It's going to try to, even with the towels there. So put your base on, make sure the base is underneath the towel. So if the towel does accidentally get saturated, it does help keep it from burning people's skin. Okay? Some other safety precautions: do not add anything to the waving lotion or the neutralizer unless the directions say so. There is a few perms there's an additive you can put in the neutralizer. Okay? It's a conditioning additive, and it also can help give shine to the hair. But most neutralizers do not tell you to add anything to it. Your Perm solutions, remember, your acid Perms and your exothermic Perm, you do have to mix something with it, or they won't work. But it comes with it in the box, and it'll say tube A is mixed with bottle B or whatever. But you do not mix. Don't go because somebody's hair is in bad shape. Don't go and get some conditioner and add to it just because you think it's going to help it work. Because if it doesn't say you can add something to it, most of the time you're going to keep the Perm from taking. It's going to dilute it, or it's going to change to pH, and you might as well just be putting water on there. So do not add anything to your waving lotion or your neutralizer unless the directions tell you to. Okay? So you would read your directions before you started. Okay? You have to read the directions before you start to see if anything's supposed to be added. You don't wait till after you get it rolled up and it said you should have put this tube on first to protect the hair. It's too late at that point. If waving lotion or neutralizer gets in the client's eyes, rinse with cool water, okay? Most of the time, you generally won't get it in their eyes. They're going to feel it running, so they'll stop it before it gets there. But occasionally they're not thinking, or it will run so quickly it may get in their eyes. It does burn, especially the waving lotion, because neutralizer is acidic, and your eye, the liquid in your eye is acidic, okay? So it generally, neutralizer will not burn that bad. You still need to rinse their eye, but waving lotion, especially your high alkaline waving lotions, can fire somebody's eye up, okay? As a rule, if they rinse it with cool water, it may be a little irritated for a while, but it's fine. It doesn't do a lot of permanent things to the eye. If they still say it is burning a lot after you rinse it out, they do need to go and have that checked out. And you may have to fill out an accident report, which we'll show you how to do, or we'll do it for you, so that they can go and get that checked out, and that it will be paid for them. But the few times that we've had the waving lotion go in someone's eye, you do have to rinse it with cool water, not warm water. That can make it worse. Rinse it with very, very cool water, and then most of the time, if they'll keep their eye closed, it will stop burning shortly. But we don't get that very often. But if you get it, stop immediately. Come get the teacher if the teacher's not standing there, and then we'll help you decide what you need to do. But don't panic. Okay? Always follow the manufacturer's instructions. Do not deviate from the instructions. And different manufacturers will have different instructions. Every perm may have a little bit of something different on how you use it, all right? There's perms where you roll it up with a solution, perms you roll with water, perms you have to mix something with it, perms that you don't mix anything. The processing times is different on every perm. It's different on different types of hair. There may be a company that has a perm for bleached hair that you put it on, and in 3 minutes you have to take it out. Another company may have a perm for bleached hair that can stay in 7 to 10 minutes. They keep telling you test curls. A lot of your perms will tell you do a test curl after 5 minutes. Other ones will say do a test curl after 20 minutes. All right? So that's why it's always very important, no matter how many perms you've given, that you read the instructions, because there could be a very important little step that you will miss if you think, well, I've given 100 perms, I know how to do this. And some companies will change their formula a little bit. And if you've given this perm over and over, and you think it's going to work the same way, and then it doesn't take right, they may have added extra conditioners to it where it needed to stay on a little bit longer. So you need to make sure that you always, when you get that person there, that you decide what perm you're going to use, you open up that box and you either take the directions out, and of course some directions are printed in the box. It's annoying, but a lot of them do print them inside the box now. Tear the box open, read your directions to make sure if